Hey there everybody, I'm about to do a page flip from the last journal that I finished, including some surprises for me because this is the journal share that almost didn't happen because I got a little bit precious in this last journal and it took me a while to complete some of my drawings and it's taken me even longer to make this video. But here it is, the last journal I filled, a lot of cool stuff in here. You might see why I started to get a little precious about it. I'll have some tips and short tricks that I distill from this video, but this is going to be the long one where I go through every single page. I've got my Earl Grey tea right here, so we're ready to go. Let's do this. So it's been a while since I finished this journal, and it's been even longer since I started it, but finish is a tricky thing. So anyways, let's do this. So I think I started this in mid-November. I started this journal, and I start with, I got my basic journaling here, my daily morning journaling routine, and then like I do enjoy, I took the front cover of the sketchbook and decided to fill that with a crazy drawing, so I've spent a lot of time there. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about in this journal share is just how you can become attached to something and it can slow you down and you will make less risky decisions the more attached to something you become. But I'll go into this a little bit more later, but basically I like to fill the front pages with something more symbolic or metaphorical and had fun doing these drawings here. But I'll talk more about these drawings in another video. So anyways, just got my daily morning journaling routine that I do, and this is from some nature journalings that I was doing at that time. I think starting in October of that year, I was doing a challenge to nature journal every single day, and so there's examples in here, for example, where I did nature journaling at my work or in my garden at home, and that's something that I had not done in the past. So this was at OAEC where I work, and some cool bees and different types of hoverflies that I was documenting. Then I've got some notes here. The next day, I believe this is the next day, I was nature journaling about this katydid, and if you've seen my video on being wrong, that's where I show this drawing. I also did, this is also more of that nature journaling every day challenge. The other thing I was doing was Amy Schlesser from the Nature Journal Club put out this really cool thing where she had all these different topics or themes to nature journal by. So there was one that was feel, one that was before, and then you would find a subject that you could connect to that particular theme. So this one is feel my bone, and there's this cool bone that is just a bone that I've had sitting in my house, and I decided to nature journal it that day because I didn't have another subject. And here's some more of my morning journaling. I had a lot of fun journaling when I was doing that nature journaling every day. I had a lot of fun drawing the frogs and the lizard that I have in Bavaria inside of my study, and so that was really fun. And so here, for example, I was looking at the eye through my close focus binoculars, and that was one of my favorite things, and I did a little diagram here showing what I thought it would look like in cross section because it wasn't what I expected an eye to look like. So yeah, that was really fun. So if you have an aquarium or a terrarium or even houseplants, that's a really good source of material for nature journaling, especially if it's on a rainy day or something like that. A lot more with that lizard. That lizard head is really hard for me to draw. Here's an example of something. I was stuck at the mechanics and there was a fishing magazine, so I just drew what I saw on the front cover of the fishing magazine. because of doing that daily nature journaling challenge, I ended up drawing and nature journaling a lot of things that I had never done before. So for example, I tried to do a rainbow on this rainy day, and that's something I realized that maybe when I was a little kid I used crayons to draw a rainbow, but this is the first time that I drew a rainbow as an adult, and so it's interesting to realize, oh, I've never done that before. Here was the thing that was a good example of something that's very full of action and hard to nature journal, but I at least attempted it here. While I was sitting at this window, a hummingbird chased another hummingbird, and one flew inside of my house and back out the window in this cool loop while I was sitting there with my mug of tea. And so it would have been really easy for me to just not try to journal that at all, but I decided, hey, I'm gonna go for it. That was such a cool event. And you can also remember, you can use your words really heavily in such a situation and explain more of it in words. And you can see here just some quick sketches of hummingbirds. So what I'm trying to tell you is that doing action events is not that hard. The hardest part is psychological. So just giving yourself permission to try and to simplify it as much as possible, because I'm telling you, if you include more action stuff like that in your nature journal, it's going to be so awesome and so rewarding to you, and you'll remember these things way, way better. I probably would not have, even though that was such a cool event, I might have forgotten about that hummingbird flying into my house. But now I will never forget. Just more stuff. I gotta draw the tarantula that I'm babysitting multiple times. So nature journaling every day, that was one of the main things that I learned, is that I hadn't drawn a lot of stuff near my house or even inside of my house. Here is a page that I did when I was teaching nature journaling at Salmon Creek Middle School. And so sometimes when I'm teaching, I don't really get as in depth with the drawings, and I often don't do watercolor because sometimes I'm teaching people who don't have access to watercolor supplies. Here was a Jerusalem cricket is what I call them. Some people call them potato bugs, and hey, that's a pretty alright sketch for a critter that's moving really fast. So one thing about drawing a lot, and I haven't been drawing enough, but if I were drawing on a daily basis, I would definitely notice it, is that you start to get better at that visual memory, where you can take sort of a snapshot of an action sequence with your mind and draw it later. So that only comes from practice and from careful observation. So I think I actually managed a pretty good job in this quick several second sketch of this Jerusalem cricket, even though it probably wasn't staying still for very long. But anyways, that was really fun teaching at that middle school. More of my morning journaling practice. Oh yeah, this was fun doing some tracking, and I think this was for a tracking class. I followed along something I haven't done in a while, but this is with Jim Sullivan's tracking class out at the coast. So this is an example of how you can take your nature journaling and go with another group. It doesn't have to be a nature journaling group. You can take all of your nature journaling stuff and go to, it could be like the Birders, the Audubon Society, or it could be the Lichen Society. That would be a really fun one to go with. Or it could be a mushroom club, and you can try to adapt your nature journaling to what they're doing and show how nature journaling really can be a way to deepen your learning about different stuff. So I like to go on tracking walks or birding walks, and while everyone else is birding or tracking, I'm nature journaling and tracking. So here are some different skulls. One thing I've been trying to get better at is looking at skulls and pellets and trying to tell the difference between voles, rats, and gophers. So all three are rodents, sort of similar sizes. So through this drawing, it helps me learn a lot better. Anyways, so going on a tracking class is a really fun way to practice nature journaling. Here was from a meeting at my work, so a little bit of sketchnoting. Here's some more sketchnoting. I went to a cool event at the Environmental Volunteers building down near the Baylands, and it was really fun to see some people speak, and so I tried to do sketchnoting, which is not my strong point, but at least I tried. So here's another thing to think about, is that if your nature journaling kit is really convenient, then when you go to talks or presentations or clubs or meetings, you can take all your nature journaling stuff and you can practice sketchnoting, because sketchnoting and nature journaling are like two sides of the same coin, and so you can get better at your nature journaling by practicing sketchnoting and vice versa. So I kind of apply my same nature journaling approach to when I'm watching someone speak, and I've found it actually helps my critical thinking a lot. I can apply a lot of our question asking tactics from nature journaling. Here's an example where I did a lot of color swatches. So it's fun, and it can also be a good technique when you don't want to do too much drawing. So this was a very complex subject that I was interested in, and it would have been really hard to draw this oak tree. This is a deciduous oak tree with all these skinny branches. It would have been really hard to draw every single one, so I was practicing just getting the color because I was really interested in the lichen color that was created by all the branches. And so that actually ended up leading me into a conceptual nature journaling theme about optical blending, which is how your brain mixes colors that are actually separate when you see them from a distance. Here is a drawing that I did, another more creative or abstract sort of mythological drawing. And I take inspiration from a lot of different sources, but it's fun sometimes just late at night to do drawings such as that. Here's some sketchnoting, more nature journaling. Went to the carnivorous plant nursery. It's always fun. And I think at this point I was still doing that nature journaling every single day, at least for like 30 minutes. So one day might just look like this. I might do these 3 drawings of a frog, and that might be all I do for that day. I haven't been keeping that practice up. That was a really good practice, and I think I might start that up again in preparation for my Tanzania trip.
Whew, man, I'm gonna take a break. All that talking about my journal is tiring. Okay, back to it.
I went to San Diego in December, and I believe I was still nature journaling every day while I was there, so I even nature journaled this plant growing outside of my mom's house. There were also some hummingbirds there. I put a little bit of the sap of that plant right there, and it changed colors, which was cool. I got to do some nature journaling at the tide pools while I was in San Diego, or more correctly, the intertidal zone at Cabrillo National Monument where my friend Adam works. It was really cool, and I wish I could have gone back there and nature journaled more. There were some really cool species of agave that were flowering. I got to do this fun landscape-ito. Really beautiful part of San Diego. Very dramatic. I also got to go to the San Diego Zoo and nature journal some of my favorite animals, the gharials. I love drawing them. Their eyes were very intimidating subject, and I did not get into all of the detail and the patterns. One thing I struggled with here was that I had an initially relatively successful drawing showing the form of the gharial and suggesting the volumetric shapes. Then I started to go in and add these details in the texture of its skin, and that actually took a lot away from the overall shape and volumetric drawing, which is probably the priority. And this is something that I've talked about before, but it's a common difficult part in a drawing. I also got to nature journal these Colorado river toads, which are almost extinct in California. These are the ones that have DMT, but the sign didn't say anything about that. Here are some more Gharial sketches that were really fun, and here was this Anegada ground iguana, which is super endangered. I think there's only like a couple hundred in the wild, but I was drawing it and it was really cool. Here's that same iguana again, but just the tail. So you can see here sometimes how breaking something up can actually be a really fun way to get a close-up of that section of the animal without needing a bigger piece of paper. And then here I have the smaller version of it where you can see it inside of the context. These are really cool birds, cock of the rock. I rarely get to use that bright of a orange color. They're a really neat one. I saw them at a distance in Ecuador, but this is in an aviary at the zoo. So an aviary is a perfect place to go to practice nature journaling in an information-dense environment. It's a good comparison to like a real tropical forest, and so the San Diego Zoo is the perfect place to train for going nature journaling somewhere with a high information density, high biodiversity, because there will be so many species and you'll get a chance to practice somewhere that's intense. Also, another cool thing is that since there's so many people usually at a zoo, you practice building up your resistance to that, and then when you're traveling, that sort of self-discipline and resistance that you built up by nature journaling in a public place will actually help you very much. This was a fun thing. This bird was fed these small pinky mice, and I think a lot of times people see a cute bird and they assume that it's not going to eat baby mammals. Mammals get freaked out about birds eating mammals. And so there was these cool ibises. I got to sketch them a little bit so you can see I went back and forth, and some of this I did add color afterwards. It was a really fun trip. That was all in one day. So then I went back the next day and I got to draw this really cool type of raptor from, I think they're only in Africa. They might be in Eurasia as well, but it had a really cool face. Did a close-up of the face. They had a pretty nice section there about kopjes, which are these rocky outcrops in Africa that have such species as rock hyrax. So here there was a sign. Here's a good trick. Here's a good trick. You can look at a sign at a zoo or a park and just draw the sign. So I didn't get the opportunity to see the bottom of a rock hyrax foot this close while I was at the San Diego Zoo, but there was this handy dandy poster there that showed the foot. So that is one quick trick while you're nature journaling. If you see signs or maps that have interesting diagrams, you can copy those into your journal even if it's something you didn't see while you were there. Here's an interesting thing to show. So I've been practicing this thing where I sort of block in letters before I fully write in the text, and you can see that helps me space it out and also design the page a little bit better. However, I don't always get around to coming back and filling it in, and to tell you the truth, okay, I guess it's a trumpeter hornbill, but I almost couldn't tell what that word was because I just blocked it in for letters, but didn't spell it out yet. So I've been trying to find the balance in my own work of how much work I do in the field and how much work I do in the studio. And for me, definitely the work in the field is more motivating and energizing. A lot of times I don't put in very much time at home in the studio touching things up. Some people do though. And here's an example on the other end of the spectrum where I do. So these types of highlights and eyes are hard for me to do in the field, and a lot of times I don't see those kind of things on a moving animal. I don't see the highlight in its eye on a moving animal. So in this case, I did a bunch of sketches and I laid out my page with awesome California condors and even more awesome potentially secretary birds, two of my favorite birds to draw. And I did afterwards look at some photos and do some more details based on the photos. So I know some of you at home like to do this style more, and that's super cool, and that is how you get those finished drawings. So I'm trying to push myself and just be aware of what my natural tendency is, and sometimes push myself and sometimes just go with the flow. So this California condor was pretty much all done there in the field, and you can see I don't have highlights in the eyes because I could not see them because the bird was moving. So sometimes you can invent stuff that you didn't see in the field because you know it's there. So that is one benefit to studying from photos, is you'll learn where those reflections form, and then that way when you are drawing in the field you could guess where it should be on that one. By this time of the day, there were so many people at the San Diego Zoo, it was crowded. You might have seen my video where I talked about this trip, and you could see how crowded it was. So the aviaries at the San Diego Zoo are so cool. They have so many brightly colored species. I've never been able to use this blue straight out of the palette before. They also had these amazing Victoria pigeons that were probably one of the coolest birds I've ever seen. Here you can see I did a scale drawing to show how big it is. And that is a quick tip right there, is it's really good to vary in scale. So you can see here I have quite a few scales. I have the bird at this size, and I think that's sort of my natural tendency in the first sketches I would have done of this bird. Then I have one that's zoomed in a little bit more so you can see a little bit more of the patterns. Then I have a close-up on the head, and then I have one from a distance where you can see it compared to a person. So that is one quick tip, is if you notice yourself only drawing at one scale, try drawing some other scales and just being intentional about what size you draw things and what is the best size to show which information. While I was at the zoo, I had the excellent opportunity to be there when they were feeding the archer fish and feeding the birds too. So the keeper for this section put a bunch of crickets on this little fake vine here, and the archer fish were shooting water out and eating the crickets that fell. So I was so stoked to see that, something that I've seen in documentaries and on videos before, but never in real life. And that was also a classic example of something that I could have said, that is way too fast, I can't, how am I supposed to draw that? But it was a really cool action moment. So I even got water squirted on my page. So that was pretty awesome action nature journaling. More just morning journaling. Here was a fun trip with the Nature Journal Club to Deer Island. John Muir Laws was there. I did some fun landscapes, trying to really work on depth and this overlapping shapes. There were some really good options there. Some more just morning journaling and sketchnoting. Here's a trip to the carnivorous plant nursery. I think this is when I was teaching. Yeah, I was teaching a group, so I usually don't get as much drawing done. Here's I spilled some different colors, but some fun drawing at the carnivorous plant nursery. This was something that was challenging for me to draw, but that I enjoyed very much, so I tried to keep at it. Here's some more sketchnoting about levers from a really cool book that talks about the way that things work. And so these are all the different types of levers, and you can see how I created these drawings that try to simplify the definitions of the different levers. Here's a design for sewing leather. I used to do a lot more of this kind of drawing with ink. Had a really fun trip to the Entomology Museum, and I think I made a whole video about this, but that was an awesome opportunity to draw some of these insects that are not moving. Now the only problem is these specimens, sometimes they're dried up in these weird unnatural shapes, but sometimes they're really good, like this tarantula wasp. And so I got to draw so many different cool ones, including some of these that are totally extinct, and that was at the Bohart Museum at UC Davis, and super fun. Also, that was a really good example of this, how to start. because there's so many things there. It could easily become overwhelming, and it would be hard to even start drawing because you could just get stuck looking at everything. So I just arbitrarily started choosing. I know I like Hymenoptera. I asked them for a case of Hymenoptera. They brought out this beautiful case full of them, and I started drawing. So later I asked for tarantula wasps because I knew I already liked them. But sometimes you have to make arbitrary decisions. I wanted to draw this butterfly because it's extinct, but then after that I just went back to Hymenoptera because I like them so much, and I just needed something to focus on, or else I would be overwhelmed.
Man, I'm gonna take a break. All that talking about my journal is tiring. Phew. Okay, back to it.
That was a really great trip. Love nature journaling there. One of my top places to go nature journal. And just a little bit later, I went to the Eco Farms conference in Asilomar near Monterey. And so that is one of the bigger organic farming conferences in the world, and my work pays for it. So I went there as a plant person, as someone who works in a nursery propagating plants. However, I did not leave behind my nature journaling, and so I took my entire kit, and this is an example of how you can bring your nature journaling to places that aren't necessarily about nature journaling and still use the approach. Luckily, there was a walk one morning, a birding walk, and so I went on this birding walk and took my nature journal and did all these sketches while I was there. It was really awesome and was one of my favorite parts of that trip. Here are some more pages from down there in Monterey. I definitely want to make another trip. I barely scratched the surface on the shorebirds and the coastline there, which is so beautiful. This was a class that I taught at UC Santa Cruz, and while I was teaching those UC Santa Cruz students, I was so focused on teaching I didn't do that much sketching in my own book. They also had limited supplies, so when other people have limited supplies, I don't like to bust out my watercolors, for example, because that's not something that they can apply. That was a fun trip. I would like to go back to UC Santa Cruz and do more there. Here's a page where I was teaching nature journaling to some kids, and we were doing some of these exercises to practice drawing three-dimensional tubes, because that's the main thing you need for drawing trees. And I do this exercise where I tie a piece of string around the branch, and it helps you see these construction lines, or imagine the construction lines creating a three-dimensional branch. Another thing that I do is I like to apply examples outside of nature. So for example, leggings and clothing often use patterns that can either suggest the underlying shapes or hide the underlying shapes. So leggings or pants or animal stripes that go around in cross-section to the shape suggest the fullness or the lack of the shape, whereas these parallel lines take away from the three-dimensionality. Also went mushroom hunting, and mushroom hunting is something where you can get your hands dirty, but you can still try to nature journal. This was actually done after the fact, so it's sort of like a report of a mushroom hunt, but at least I put it in my nature journal. I want to do more nature journaling on mushroom hunting trips next year. Here's some fun I had with a palm tree, and in the past I would just draw them and not necessarily nature journal them, and so I did draw it quite in depth here, but I also did ask some questions, about it and try to diagram it in a nature journaling way, and I had a few good questions. Here's some more birds from a friend's house, more palm trees, some landscapes. I've been trying to get better with my landscape sketches. Sketchnoting. You can see when I'm sketchnoting stuff about my life, it's really basic. A lot of times I hardly have any drawings, but just by including some of these arrows and some boxes and stuff, it really, really helps the understanding and the processing of the information. So I did some stream of consciousness journaling there, and then finished off on the inside cover with another bigger drawing. And so I haven't been drawing in graphite for a long time, and so I don't know why I decided to do that in this one, but it was very fun, and I almost at the end decided to put watercolor on it, but I'm kind of glad that I didn't. But charcoal or graphite like this, where you're using an eraser to draw in addition to drawing with the dark lines, is very, very time consuming, and it's really amazing how you can push and pull back and forth, and that's something that I don't get to do much anymore when I'm working in watercolor, and I really miss that, and there's so much you can do. So my main goal here was to really work on composition, and I had fun, but it also took a really long time. So that's basically this journal. It ends with that, and it starts with this other big epic medieval looking drawing here on the front, and that was a really fun way to begin and close this journal. Alright, well that is that for this journal share, and I'm practically finished with my next one, because before I finished this drawing in the back and before I finished that drawing in the very front, I started my next drawing, my next journal, because usually what I do is I want to keep nature journaling, so I start the new journal. But one thing that you have to be careful of is drawings like this, you can become precious about them, and if that drawing's taking you like 5 days or more than a week to work on, it means you might be scared to take this sketchbook out into the field. So if that is the case, definitely get a new sketchbook and make sure that these precious drawings or a precious sketchbook such as this one is not keeping you from taking risks with your sketchbook. So I started in a new one. I went nature journaling well before these drawings were finished. So my main goal with these videos is to empower you to get out there, learn faster, journal, see more, understand more, ask better questions, make better observations, and question your own questions. So get out there and do it. I believe in you. That's my journal, and I have another one coming soon. Bye!